Can we make an agreement before we start today? Can we agree that psychological safety in the workplace, first of all, is for everybody, you included, but that it can no longer just be an agenda item in a meeting or a tick box that we have the policy, that we're actually going to work and strive towards creating psychological safety for self and others? I hope we can agree on that, because in today's session, I want to talk to you about how to bully-proof your leadership, and psychological safety is where it's at. Now, as you're watching, you might already know these stats, but research shows 70 to 75% of bullies who are named in an organization hold a leadership title: manager, supervisor, team lead, might even just be the day. You're like supervisor for the day, charge nurse, all the way up to C-suite. The fact that you have leadership responsibilities, authority to create a workload and divide out tasks to people who work with you and for you, puts you in a very high risk bracket to be called a bully. And that's no joke. Now, in today's session, we're going to be talking about what a bad day is versus a bully, because that's a really important distinction. We're going to break down where you can find moments that you can create a lasting positive legacy. And I'm going to give you a strategy to help you bully-proof your leadership. Now, I know we only have 20 minutes, so we're going to pack in as much as I can, and we're going to hop into this right now. Now, one of the first things I want to share with you is a little bit more about me and why I'm so passionate about creating psychological safe workplaces. My name is Tammy Dunnett, for those who don't know me already, and I am an ex-target of workplace bullying. When I was 38-ish, I found myself suddenly in this relationship with a supervisor that I just couldn't navigate. I didn't have the skills, although I didn't know it then, but I know it now. Quite a confident, capable communicator. I thought I was able to charge through and make this work. And in essence, I really thought I was training her how to treat me. It was about the 2-year mark into that experience when I realized I had somebody who had bully behaviors, and our relationship really took a turn in that moment. I ended up getting super sick to the point that I was afraid to leave my house, open my email, look at my phone, because she was everywhere in my mind. With my healing journey, leaving that organization, eventually taking the therapy and the counseling and all that work, I recognized that what was missing in our relationship was the interpersonal solutions to our interpersonal problems. You see, what happens in organizations, and you're likely aware of this, is we have 2 systems to deal with these situations: the medical system and the organizational system. The interpersonal system is lacking, and I want to help you with that today. Now, as an ex-target of workplace bullying, I also want to share with you part of my journey is I spent the 4 years in my Master's of Nursing researching organizational bullying in healthcare. Now, fate put me on this path of being an advocate for psychologically safe workplaces and helping women get out from underneath the negative effects of chronic conflict and bullying so they can get their careers back, reclaim their reputation, and get back to living a peaceful, productive life. And as fate would have it, while I was on my healing journey, while I was studying my Master's of Nursing and understanding workplace bullying, I was also teaching communication skills. Now, I have to confess, when I first got the assignment to teach communication skills, I felt a bit like a fraud. I mean, after all, I just spent 4 years in a relationship with a supervisor that I couldn't figure out, and I ended up getting really sick. So it was interesting to me to watch the evolution of how being in that place, teaching communication skills, actually gave me the aha moments that I was needing when I was the target. So let's start with understanding what a bully and a bad day have in common and what is different between those two. So a bad day is about me, not you. And I'm going to give some examples here, but consider when you go to work every day in your role as a leader and what you would love to accomplish in a day and the values that you bring to that job, and all those measuring sticks that you use to say, I've done a good job today. When you can't live into that, when you have a hard time being the leader you want to be, because there's contextual factors, there's changes, there's struggles, there's COVID, okay? All of these things challenge our version and vision of what we'd like to be as a good leader, and then we feel like we are failing, that we're not meeting the mark. That's about me. That's about me feeling like I'm failing at reaching my own benchmarks. I have some examples here for you. Say you woke up late, or you got behind a car crash or a train and you got to work late and the meeting's already started and you're presenting. You walk in, your boss gives you a look, your colleagues are looking at you, and you're feeling like you're already defeated before you start. You're behind the 8 ball, so you end up working harder, you rush through the presentation, you don't take breaks because you got to catch up. And then as somebody comes to you for some support or they have a question, you don't have the capacity to deal with them. And maybe you say something you wouldn't normally say, you roll your eyes when you wouldn't normally do that because you're tired, you're frustrated. That's about me. They happen to walk into that stink and they got to witness it coming out of me. The intention was not directed at them. The intention was to release a little bit of the pressure that we've put on ourselves. Now, does that matter at the end of the day when we measure impact? When that person walks away and they go, wow, he was such a jerk, or she was just so rude. Impact is what we measure. Intention is where we can make a difference. We're going to come back to that. Perhaps your best friend or your best friend at work has taken a new job, they've moved away, and they're not there to support you anymore. Or you get home, and on top of that day that you've just had, the dog is out again, and you're just like, oh my goodness. Like, seriously, how am I going to be a good dog parent and a good boss and a good wife and a good husband, whatever that is? And the neighbors come by and they go, hey, you missing your dog again? And you're like, stop getting on my case about the dog. You weren't intending to hurt them. It just was an expression. Now, this doesn't forgive the impact, but this is, again, where we're going to make the difference as we talk forward. So let's look next at what a bully is. There are some similarities between a bad day and a bully, but there's also some very important distinctions. Now, when I was doing my research in my Master's of Nursing, ironically, in all the papers I read, there was no clear-cut definition or no agreed-upon definition as to what a bully is. But there were characteristics that came through in every definition. So let's just start with the very basic Merriam-Webster. This is an abuse and mistreatment of someone vulnerable by someone stronger and more powerful. At its foundation, that's what bullying is. Now, in terms of the characteristics that were showing up in the research, the first thing is it's unwanted. I don't enjoy it when you call me names. I don't enjoy it when you sigh, when I raise my hand in a meeting. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't feel good and I don't want it. The same is true in a bad day. This can be covert or overt, meaning that it just happens between you and me in the office where nobody else sees it, or it's in an open space where others can witness it. The second element is there's verbal and nonverbal elements. Now, it can be just nonverbal, or it can be both verbal and nonverbal. You can't have verbal without nonverbal. So this is a snide remark. This might be a put down, calling names. This could be rolling of the eyes, crossing the arms, turning away. Again, none of that feels good. This also happens with a bad day. But here's where things shift. And here's where we're going to be able to reverse engineer this to help prevent ourselves from being put in a position where we are called a bully. There is an imbalance or misuse of power to gain control. Now, you have a leadership position. You have supervisory responsibilities. That very fact puts you in this category where somebody might perceive that there's an imbalance or a misuse of control to achieve an outcome. So perception, the relationship that we have, will become critical in terms of reducing your risk of being called a bully. And maybe we'll just stop here for a second and I'll ask you to consider two relationships that you have. One with somebody that you get along really well with and one that you don't get along with really well. And just consider how those interactions go for you. What do you say to yourself before you show up? How do you interact with them or not interact with them? Is there a preference? And recognize or explore the latitude that you give each of these people. How much do you trust them? How much are you willing to say, here's the direction, go figure out the details and report back to me? What happens is when we have a relationship of care and concern. So we have actually invested our time in them. We know who they are, what lights them up. We know some of their competing priorities outside of work, inside of work. Essentially, we've gotten to know them beyond the job description. We've made investments into caring, and caring becomes a commodity. The fact that you can already recall a person who you give more latitude than the other person who you kind of like have on a tighter rope for whatever reason is an example of how much caring you have as a commodity in that relationship. So when we have an investment in somebody and we trust them more and we feel like we can, let them do their job, we will forgive maybe sometimes the errors that they make easier. And we will recognize them as learning moments, whereas the other person who we have a tighter rein on, we don't feel like we have that trust in the relationship, we will probably not be as forgiving. And we will look at these learning moments as maybe more remedial moments. And just to recognize in yourself that caring that you have for each of those people is part of what's influencing your perception of that relationship. We're going to come back to this here too. Now, the next characteristic is that there is an intentional decision, action to intimidate, harm, degrade, offend, humiliate a person or a group of people. Intention is what we can influence. Impact is what we measure. Now, this is where I will share with you my personal belief on the stats and the research that tell me 70% of you will be called a bully in your lifetime as a supervisor, leader, manager. I don't believe those stats to be true. I believe what we have is an interpersonal problem and we need an interpersonal solution, because I don't think you wake up in the morning thinking, how can I ruin Tammy's day today? In what ways can I isolate her and degrade her in front of others? Like, oh, that would be just such a great day. I don't think you intentionally do this. And that matters, because if you're intentionally doing this, that's the definition of a bully, and that's a different intervention. If it is happening, it can be the result of a bad day where somebody walks away and feels like you intended to humiliate them when you yelled at them in public. It can be perceived as intentional when you give them an assignment to go work on their own and everybody else is off on a break. Those things can feel intentional, but we have to dig deeper to understand if they truly were intentional. And if they weren't, then we just start to navigate the relational piece so that we can prevent that risk in our lives as a leader. Now, the last characteristic I want to share with you here is repeated in nature. And I have an asterisk here because very important changes happened in 2018 here in Alberta. I would encourage you to check your own occupational health and safety regulations. But essentially, the definition of harassment became this: a single or repeated incident. And I'm going to say that again: a single or repeated incident of objectionable or unwelcome conduct, comment, bullying, or action. A single or repeated incident that is intended to intimidate, offend, degrade, or humiliate a person or group of people. And a single or repeated incident that results in psychological harm to workers. What I love about this is that it is a single episode. You no longer have to be forced to go back into a work environment where you are being harmed. And as a leader, this is for you as well. I often think that we talk about psychological safety for employees, but you are an employee of an organization. You also matter. Now, does this mean organizations have caught up and that in a single moment we're able to stomp it out? No. But what this does mean is that employees and employers both have rights and responsibilities to speak up, be educated, to have things investigated, and to be treated as a valued member. January 2021, Bill C-65 came into effect, and this is for all federally regulated employers. They now have an obligation to investigate, record, report, prevent, provide training all around harassment and violence in the workplace, using similar definition around what bullying and harassment is. Now, if you're not a federally regulated organization, you would fall underneath the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety or your provincial or state occupational health and safety regulations. Now, I know that that varies between Canada and the States and across the world, so make sure you're looking at your regulations to help with that. Now, I mentioned intention versus impact, and I also mentioned perception. I want to come back to perception first, and then we're going to go into the next stage. So perception is actually a 4-step process, and most of us stop at step number 3, which is judgment, interpretation. Step number 4 requires us to actually engage with the other person, which is why we often don't do it. So when we talk about perception in the 4 stages, the first thing is selection. So when you come in as a leader, how you show up in the morning, how you're dressed, how you talk, what you're holding, what you drive, everything about you is like a billboard. And they're going to select pieces of information to then filter through their checklist of what they think a good boss might be. And so I'll share with you here a diagram. Right, so the first thing they're doing is they're selecting to determine whether or not you might be a friend or a foe. So they're gathering all this information. And with that, they're going to organize it now into all these different checklists or silos that they have as to what what they're looking for. Like when you think back to the dating scene, you have a checklist of things you will accept and not accept. Same thing in the organization. They know what kindness looks like. They know what fake looks like. They know what authenticity looks like by their own definition. And they're organizing all of that into these checklists to see where you land. And then from that, they're going to interpret. As you do with your employees, you interpret, make a judgment as to whether or not they're trusting or not trusting, good or bad. They are approachable, not approachable. I certainly worked in an organization where my colleague was deemed unapproachable and you just never went to her. And I'm like, wow, that kind of put her in a box. And it never let her come out of that. They didn't give her any opportunity to be something other than. And this is the problem with the perception process. When we get to the interpretation stage, we make our judgment. Perhaps you're a bully or you're having a bad day. We'll go there. That's where it stops. And we don't validate what we think has just become our reality. Now, you've heard the terms perception is reality. I say perception is reality untested, unless you've done the 4th step, which is negotiate. Negotiation is the only step out of these 4 that is done external to our body, external to our mind, and it has to involve talking with another person. And in a lot of ways, this is the scary stuff, because now I have to come to you and say, hey, I think you're a bully. That is really scary. And so in terms of resolving conflict, they tend to not come to you. They go to their colleagues, they go to HR, they go to your boss above you, to everywhere but to you, which does not give you an opportunity to negotiate. This is where a lot of people feel handcuffed, in that they can't have a conversation to understand what it is you've done to be called a bully. So in hearing that, we're going to reverse engineer the problem to give you some strategies in order to overcome the risk of being called a bully. Earlier, we talked about that caring conversation. So we know that caring conversations, when you get to know your people, is a commodity. It's like putting money in the bank. So in a study from 2016 by Colbert and friends, how caring positively impacts the workplace, this is pre-pandemic, we know that workplaces are better places when coworkers care for each other. Now, one of those risk factors, step number 3, was that you have a position of power. If you try to work to flatten the hierarchy and you see people as team members who have special skills, that will be one way to help reduce the perception of power, because you're coming to them and saying, hey, I see you. I value what you're contributing. What do you think about this? And then they're part of the solution. So one of those ways to decrease perception of power is to engage with people and have conversations. And then this, when you role model that, goes also laterally. So workplaces are better when coworkers care for each other. What happens when we have caring embedded in the organization is plentyfold, it's multifold, it magnifies. And so we have improved task and emotional support. We have career development. People are more likely to volunteer. They want to take on extra studies. They want to get better at what they do because they see that what they're doing is contributing to the bigger goal. We have an exchange of resources. People are sharing the support of their time, their advice, their money even. They're like, and you think about teachers, they're often paying for supplies in their classroom. That's a sharing of their resources for the better good. And then caring also invests in the future. So just like your money in the bank grows as an investment, so does caring. It's an investment in your organization, and it will help others to pursue opportunities for growth and development. Now, how does this help you as a leader to position yourself as a non-bully leader? Because that caring commodity comes back to you as well. It's that reciprocity. When I value you, you're more likely to value me. And if I make a mistake and I stumble, because we see each other as caring colleagues, you're more likely to forgive me and give me an opportunity to have a conversation with you so we can get back on track. Caring commodities will help you with your leadership to not be seen as a bully, but to be seen as someone who is human. And I can certainly attest to the fact that when I realized I was struggling with my supervisor, I saw her as anything but a human, anything but a person who has other complications. I simply saw her as a bully. Now, I want to share post-pandemic as well with you, because post-pandemic, we're actually seeing the effects of not being able to have those caring conversations, those moments where we pass in the hall, or those, kind of in between meetings where we can just chat and talk about how things are going and where the struggles are. And I can see pictures of your family. So those moments are gone. And here's the impact. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, 75% of employees say they feel more socially isolated. Isolation is one of the things on the list of what a bully does. Now, perception, remember, select. My boss doesn't call me anymore. I've noticed that it's been 3 weeks. His emails are very short. He seems to be talking to other people more often. So this is kind of interpreting, gathering information. I've interpreted that to mean that I'm not as valuable. Therefore, they're a bully. And being isolated. So there is a risk that this can be extended into a claim of bullying. 57% are feeling greater anxiety. 53% say they feel more emotionally exhausted. And when you're exhausted, a bad day can look like a bully. And this is a study that had 2,700 employees from across more than 10 industries respond. Another study shares that 69% of employees said they would work harder if they felt appreciated. This is directly related to that caring conversation and the commodities that you build into the relationship with your employees. A simple call. I'll tell you, I had a coach text me the other day saying, hey, I just want to check in. How are things going? And I was like, oh, she cares about me. I think I'll work with her longer, right? So these caring moments can pay back dividends. And 20% of remote employees say they lack a sense of belonging and they sometimes feel lonely. Now, there's 4 things that we're all communicating on a fundamental level. We want to feel like we belong. We want to feel loved. We want to feel competent, and we want to feel capable. And so if I don't feel loved, I'm isolated, I don't feel like I belong because I'm not with anybody, those are 2 big strikes in building that caring culture. So let's talk about what you can do now as a boss to start to build that caring culture. The first thing is you have to start. You have to lead. You need to put this in your schedule. And this may just be simply like every day between 10 and 10:30, you're going to do a walkabout. You're going to walk through the office and you're going to see the conditions and you're going to hear the conversations and you're going to say, hello, how are you? How are the kids? Is there anything I can help you with to make your day better? You need to lead by making deposits into that caring relationship with your employees. And when you do that, they will have your back when things go sideways. The second thing you need to do is help role model that interpersonal problems require interpersonal solutions. Now, I will share with you, that was the gap for me. I was asking for people to support me, and there wasn't anybody who could step into that void for me and with me. That is what I've been able to help shrink down for others. And so you'll see that there's a download here. It's called the 10 Safe Conversational Starters. There's a couple ways to use this. First, in your own conversations. When somebody comes to you and they speak in a way that's offensive, maybe they're rolling their eyes when they talk to you, perhaps they're backstabbing, withholding information. There's 10 most common behaviors that we see in the workplace. You have a statement that is there that you can use that does not create defense, but it creates an opening for conversation. And they're fabulous. The second thing you're going to see in there is a really quick 3-step process and a perception check process, so you can continue to build on these skills. So if these 10 safe conversation starters don't seem to really fit the mark, then go to the perception check and use that tool. So as you're role modeling it for yourself, when you come in and you say, oh, this is going to be a hard conversation, and I really want to make sure that we both can contribute. So do you mind if I'm just going to write a few things out and I'm going to read it out just to make sure I don't mess it up. Be human. It is okay to say, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to try something new and I want you on board with me. It humanizes you. You don't have to have all the answers as the boss. And I think that sometimes our misconception is that as the leader, we need to know it all. And if we don't know it all, we get a little bit worried that we're going to be found out. Oh my gosh, I'm an imposter. Simply state it up front. You know what? This is hard for me too, and I want to try something new. So I'm just going to read this out. Now, the second way you can use this tool is if an employee comes to you and they say, hey, I think I'm being bullied by John. Sorry, John. No offense to the Johns out there. What happens is we tend to hear that word bully and we kind of freeze, like, oh, I don't want to be a part of this. That's that's craziness. That's a big word. And it is a big word. I will invite you to look at that word as something bigger. When somebody comes to me and they say, I'm being bullied, what I hear, and I need to validate because this is my perception, selection, organization. What I'm hearing is, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do next. I've tried some things. My capacity is overrun, and I don't have the resilience anymore to continue to do this alone. I would invite you to hear those things that they're saying when they tell you, I'm being bullied, and not get so concerned about the label as it is about the situation. And then how can I help you to level up and revisit these conversations? Oftentimes, it's been my experience that oftentimes people don't do that step 4, that negotiation piece. They've made their judgment. And then once we make a judgment that somebody's a bully, so John's a bully, all I ever see every day I see John is all the things that validate my perception. And I ignore all the rest. I never give John a chance to be anything other than a bully. And so sometimes we need to role model that with our employees. And then sometimes we need to mentor them. So use these 10 safe conversation starters to mentor your employees. Share this with them. Let them know that these are the conversations I will have with you if I'm struggling. I expect you to also try these conversations. And if you need to practice and role play, I'm here for you. Or you can designate somebody else to take that role for you. And the third thing I would invite you to do is to reward people for coming forward. There's a lot of research that says in healthcare in particular, 85% of healthcare workers witness or observe offensive bullying behaviors on a regular basis, but only 15% are brave enough to say something. And that's because the culture of, retaliation is strong. The fear of, having work job action against them is strong. So celebrate those who come forward. I'm not saying you gotta throw them a party. What I'm saying is value and honor them because they cared enough to come to you and say, listen, there's something that's not right. I don't know how to deal with this and I need some help. Honor that. And then if you can take it a step further and it's appropriate, I would celebrate that as a team, that we're identifying issues that we need to work on and we're working together to solve these problems. So in today's session, what we covered is how to bully-proof your leadership and to get to the heart of the matter quickly. With that, identifying what a bad day is and what a bully is, knowing that there can be some overlap, recognizing that when somebody uses the word bully, that we need to look beyond that and look at capacity and resilience and those pieces. What have they done already? Role modeling what a safe conversation can look like, being human and saying, hey, this is going to be hard for me too. Let's work on it together. And then building those caring commodities within your relationships, investing in the other person so that when things go wrong, maybe you do something that they wouldn't have normally done or wouldn't have valued, they can extend some grace and gratitude to you so that we can move forward together as a team. The more you invest in them, the more they will invest in you. I hope this has been helpful. My name is Tammy Dunnett, and I am the CEO of Relationship Revolution, where we are changing the way relationship is done, one conversation at a time. Stay connected. All of my contact information is below, as is the free download. Take care.